New York City lost nearly 48 million tourists in less than 3 years, a number significant enough to shake the entire US domestic tourism industry. And what's even more noteworthy is, this isn't just a consequence of the pandemic. People like to blame COVID because it's the most acceptable explanation. But behind that horrifying decline lies a terrifying truth that not everyone dares to face. Streets that are now the domain of crime and vice, expensive rental rooms that are more cramped than a coffin, and homeless tent camps springing up like mushrooms right in the heart of Manhattan. New York seems to be entering a new dark age, where the American dream is not only delayed, but also on the brink of collapse. In today's video, we won't just expose the dark underbelly casting a shadow over New York City. We'll also trace the journey of a city that was once the heart of the American economy, culture, and dream, but has become a place where even its own residents no longer want to live in, and tourists turn their backs on. Please watch until the end of the video, because the story of New York today is not just the story of a city losing itself, but could also be a prophecy for what awaits the rest of America. Once considered a symbol of the modern American dream, Manhattan, New York is not only a financial center, but also a place where millions of young people aspire to, hoping to change their lives. But right now, opportunity sometimes starts in a closet. Right in Midtown Manhattan, the brightest heart of New York, you can absolutely find an apartment with a rent of just $650 a month. But this low price isn't a bargain. It's living proof of the desperation in a city that's slowly shrinking for those who aren't rich enough to live properly. The apartment is only 11 square meters. There are no windows. There is no oven. There is no escape route. It's nestled between a row of Midtown buildings, right in the heart of glamorous Manhattan. With a rent of only $650 a month, many people would think this is a bargain. But when the door closes, the truth inside is suffocating, both literally and figuratively. The tenant is Lena, a girl who works in the fashion industry. Having lived in a luxury building, she chose to move here to save $2,600 per month, a significant amount for anyone. In a space so small you couldn't stretch your arms, Lena managed to arrange everything. A simple kitchen that mice had visited in the summer, an attic bedroom close to the ceiling, where adults couldn't sit up straight, and a small corner for her beloved dog, which wasn't even big enough for him to wag his tail when she came home. But the story doesn't end with inconvenience. Many people who watched the video about the apartment reacted strongly. They believe this is a fire trap in the heart of Manhattan, as cooking without ventilation or emergency exits could endanger both residents and surrounding communities. They felt a pang of sadness seeing Lena and the dog trying to survive in a space where even breathing oxygen was becoming more difficult than ever. However, some people also shared that $650 in Midtown is too cheap. You can't ask for more. A saying that is both practical and reveals a thought-provoking reality. Rent in New York has inflated to the point where even an apartment the size of a closet is considered a valuable opportunity. But if Lena, someone with a stable job, income, and options, still has to live like this, what happens to those who don't even have $650 a month to rent a coffin house? That's right, they still live in coffins, but those coffins move from Midtown Manhattan to the West Side, from a building straight down into the earth. On the other side of the city, in the Freedom Tunnel, an abandoned railway line beneath the West Side Highway, a man named Carlos, an immigrant from Cuba, has chosen to live underground. He came to the US by boat in 1980, lived in temporary shelters, but after witnessing terrifying scenes and feeling unsafe many times, he moved permanently into the sewer system. That's where he calls home. Carlos has lived underground for over 2 years, and his house, though built from trash, has a surprisingly neat appearance. There are computers, refrigerators, microwaves, and even printers. Electricity is conducted from the end of the tunnel, and all items are picked up and recycled. He used a ladder to climb into the main living space, keeping everything clean, odorless, and tidy. as if trying to cling to the last vestiges of dignity in a city that had abandoned him long ago. The story of Lena and Carlos isn't about two opposing extremes. It's about 2 points on the same plane. A New York that is glamorous on the outside, but inside are countless layers of survival, each layer shrinking more than the last. From tiny, closet-sized $650 apartments to dark, underground homes, every option reflects a bitter paradox. What was once called the heart of America now only has room for those willing to live cramped and confined, as if in a coffin. And if those people, still working, still trying to live decently, had to choose between the basement and the wooden box, then, is New York really still a truly livable city? New York City was once an unshakable symbol of the American dream, a place where anything is possible if you are hardworking and courageous enough. But that dream, over time, seems to be slowly drained away by rent bills, grocery bills, or even the price of a $10 morning latte. In 2025, in New York, even a six-figure income won't be enough to buy a decent life, let alone a dream. New York City is currently leading the list of the most expensive cities in the United States. The latest statistics show that the income needed to live comfortably in Manhattan is a staggering $138,500 per year, and that's not even including expenses for a more affluent lifestyle. A resident of Brooklyn shared, "I only make half of that, but I live comfortably. Sometimes I can even buy a few things I like." A gentle confession, but behind it lies a precarious reality. Rental prices are a prime example of an expectation reversal. A Soho apartment has a median price of over $7,400 per month. In the Upper East Side, once considered more breathable, the figure is still $3,950. And if you're willing to live in a room without a washing machine, without air conditioning, without quiet, just a small room in a shared apartment, the price can still range from $1,500 and up. The apartments described as needing more TLC, i.e., special care, are actually run-down spaces that tenants must fix and accept themselves. Even basic needs like food have become a burden. A can of whole milk at Whole Foods can cost nearly $6, 40% more than the same product in Chicago. A box of Cheerio cereal can cost up to $6.79 in New York, while in many other places it's only around $3.69 to $5. And if you order a medium latte at Starbucks in Manhattan, almost $10, enough to buy a decent lunch in other states. What's concerning is that those prices are gradually becoming the new normal. A Wome 56 years old once lived in a luxury apartment costing $4,000 a month, despite admitting they couldn't afford it, but still signed the lease, believing it was an essential New York experience. After that, she was forced to cut expenses, moving into a less comfortable apartment for $1,600 a month, in exchange for mice, cockroaches, and a space so cramped it felt like stepping into a greenhouse aisle. A gym membership, $270 per month. An evening at Broadway, over $200 is common. If you're not financially privileged, living in New York now isn't a dream anymore. It's a constant auction with every minute and second of life. Is this still a city to live in, or just an expensive playground for the few? Many people call it an opportunity cost, the price of living among the vibrant pace of life, interesting people, and countless memorable experiences. But for the majority of residents who only want a roof over their heads, a meal, and a little peace, are all those unique experiences worth the price they pay? In a city where a cup of coffee can cost as much as a meal, the scariest thing isn't the rising prices, it's that we're starting to accept them as normal. And perhaps that is New York's greatest loss today. New York was once the brightest symbol of the American dream. a place where people believed that if you were persistent and hard-working enough, you would have a home, a job, and a better future. But as we enter 2025, that image seems to be fading into memory. Across the streets of Manhattan, the Bronx and Brooklyn, makeshift tents are sprouting up like open wounds in the heart of the city. The once bustling streets are now home to those with nowhere else to go. According to the latest data, New York City has over 108,000 homeless people, the highest number ever recorded in the city's history. More concerningly, the number of single homeless individuals has increased by over 117% in just a decade. But behind those seemingly cold numbers are tragic stories. People who were once teachers, workers, drivers, or veterans, now forced to live under bridges, on sidewalks, or in underground tunnels. They weren't failures, as many people once thought, but simply couldn't survive the increasingly brutal cost spiral of a city that no longer had room for the vulnerable. Homelessness is no longer limited to the ground. They poured into the subway systems, where cold plastic seats became beds for thousands of people each night. In the E line or train number 6, it's easy to spot people curled up in blankets, wrapped in backpacks and plastic bags, as if clinging to the last vestiges of warmth left in the earth. Some people also choose to travel overnight on circular trains, as it's the only place they won't be kicked out. Even JFK International Airport, the city's gateway, has now become a makeshift shelter. At Terminal 5 at night, you'll see many people who aren't there to fly anywhere. They came because there was shelter, heating, and they could be at peace for a few hours without being chased away. Many homeless people take the subway to Jamaica Station, then transfer to the air train to enter the airport area, where security forces cannot intervene unless they cause trouble. The city, somehow, allowed the airport to become an informal, temporary shelter, and the people gradually came to see it as normal. Some organizations like Urban Pathways try to reach out and support. They go with the police at night, looking for people who need help, providing shelter or medical services. But even enthusiasts admit the current system is like bailing water with a sieve. Few people are helped, and even more refuse assistance, because the shelters are overcrowded, unsafe, and undignified. But is it fair that the very homeless people who once believed in the American dream and contributed to this society now have to find a place to sleep in airport corridors or under freezing train cars? Are we becoming desensitized to the sight of people being abandoned in the heart of one of the wealthiest cities on the planet? If New York, the heart of America, is slowing down because there's no longer enough room for the very people who built it, how much longer can that American dream survive? And we, those who still have homes to return to, will we choose to turn our backs? Or will we stop to ask, can a great city truly exist if it allows its most vulnerable to fade into darkness? New York was once the city of lights, of a vibrant, never-sleeping rhythm of life, where one could wander through the boroughs of Manhattan, Brooklyn, or Queens all night without fear. But in recent years, and especially since the pandemic, many city residents are wondering, is New York still as safe as it used to be? The latest crime data reveals a concerning trend. Street and public space crime rates have surged, particularly in areas like subways, parks, bus stations, and even supermarkets. Random scuffles and petty thefts are no longer rare. They seem to be becoming a familiar part of urban life. Many residents living near bustling neighborhoods like Times Square, Harlem, or Lower Manhattan also reported having to change their daily routines, not going out after 9 p.m., limiting subway use at night, and even always carrying pepper spray or a personal alarm. Things that seem to only exist in movies are now a part of everyday life. However, what's even more concerning is the sense of helplessness and ambiguity creeping into the hearts of the residents. They are unsure who the perpetrator is: a homeless person, an addict, an unemployed individual, or simply a member of society who has been abandoned. And in that chaos, what's right and what's wrong seems to become increasingly blurred. The city government has repeatedly announced programs such as the Subway Safety Plan, Safe NYC, or increased police presence at key stations. But the actual effectiveness remains a big question mark. With a limited budget, a thin workforce, and pressure from multiple sides, solutions are often reactive rather than long-term preventive measures. So, what's really happening to this city? Is New York, the once vibrant heart of the American dream, gradually losing control due to the cascading consequences of unsustainable economic, social, and policy implications? And if faith in safety is also depleted, what else can keep those who once called this place home? New York was once an inseparable symbol in the minds of Americans. The global financial center where Wall Street and skyscrapers provided endless vitality for the entire country. But now, that city is witnessing an exodus so astonishing. It's becoming a victim of the very might that once made people believe this was the place you wanted to live, work, and weave the American dream. According to a new report, since 2019, nearly 160 major companies in New York, mostly investment and financial services firms, have moved their headquarters out of the city, taking with them approximately $1 trillion in managed assets. I'm not talking about a few small companies, but names like ICANN, Capital, Elliott Management, ARK Investment. Businesses that were once as integral to Manhattan as part of the city's economic lifeblood. The head of BlackRock, the world's largest asset management firm, once warned that if New York doesn't get a handle on crime, pollution, and its declining school system, the city will lose even more businesses. Despite data from the NYPD showing a significant decrease in subway accidents in early 2025, public sanitation issues, petty theft, dirty rats, and police response times still weary residents. The migration of businesses is not just a story of numbers. Wall Street, which once accounted for 16% of the city's economic activity, contributed nearly 7% of the state's total GDP. The damage to personal and corporate tax revenue could reach billions of dollars annually if this trend continues. The story of New York's exodus wasn't entirely about financial fear. It was also about an identity crisis. If the very success that once symbolized confidence turned into a barrier making the city expensive, unsafe, and unmanageable, could the American dream still exist in the heart of what was once its core? In New York City, where the cost of living has become unaffordable for millions, the welfare system was once seen as the last lifeline for those struggling in the current of life. But by 2025, it seems even that life raft is deflating. Although there is positive information that the state will increase unemployment benefits from $504 to $869 per week starting in October 2025, the reality is much more complex. The state's unemployment insurance fund has been in deficit since 2019 and only revived this year thanks to an $8 billion emergency relief package from the Reserve Fund. That is, for many years, thousands of people who lost their jobs did not receive meaningful support, and that slow recovery came too late for many families. SNAP, the food stamp program that helps feed approximately 1.8 million city residents, is also at risk. If the federal government shifts the financial burden to the state, NYC could have to bear an additional $250 million, which would almost certainly lead to benefit cuts. For those living hand-to-mouth, this is no different than taking away their only meal of the day. Even policies once praised, such as paid sick leave during COVID, will expire by mid-2025. Some programs like paid parental leave have seen a slight increase, but with a maximum of $177 per week. Is that enough to keep a family from falling behind in a city where rent alone consumes half of that? And with changes to federal law, immigrants, Even those who are paying taxes and working legally could be excluded from support programs altogether. Even social organizations, public hospitals, and subsidized housing are facing the risk of budget shortfalls as tax and funding policies change. When those who need help the most have their support removed, what will keep them from the abyss? Is the welfare system, instead of being a safety net, gradually becoming a leaky sieve where only those who are healthy enough can hold on? Amidst the cold concrete blocks, the once brightly lit streets now silent with laughter, and hundreds of makeshift tents crammed along the avenue, the big question still echoes: can New York be revived? For many, especially those who witnessed the city's golden age, when a common worker could still support a family on minimum wage, New York now seems like a heartbreaking reflection. But even in the darkest of times, there are glimmers of light coming from the community, from ordinary people, and from things as small yet persistent as the heartbeat of this city. Undeniably, New York is experiencing a systemic crisis: soaring housing prices, businesses fleeing, rising crime, overburdened public services, and over 100,000 people living without shelter. But what makes New York special has never been its perfection, and that is precisely the ability to bounce back. A DNA that this city has demonstrated many times throughout history. After 9/11, after Superstorm Sandy, after the 2008 financial crisis, and even after the harshest winters of the pandemic. Today, there are quiet but powerful efforts underway. Some neighborhoods like Williamsburg, Astoria, and Long Island City are witnessing community revitalization from the ground up. Not from major policies, but from small groups, volunteers, non-profit organizations like the Coalition for the Homeless, local churches, and even formerly homeless residents who are now returning to help others. Small-scale affordable housing projects like Breaking Ground, community food markets sponsored by City Harvest or Trader Joe's in the suburbs, and free mental health support services from NYC Well or Talkspace are starting to emerge. Although still limited, they are proof of one thing: hope does not die. New York may never be quite the same as it used to be. But who says a new version, one that is more sustainable, more humane, and less embellished, can't be better? Because ultimately, a city is not built solely by skyscrapers. It was built on unity, on the determination not to leave anyone behind, and on the millions of stories of people who still believe that no matter the circumstances, New York is still worthy of being loved, lived in, and reborn. So, what about you? If given the opportunity, are you ready to contribute to rebuilding a kinder New York instead of turning your back and waiting for the impossible? There are cities where just hearing their name conjures up an entire era. New York used to be like that, a symbol of opportunity, of vitality, of an America constantly moving forward. But as the lights fade in the once sleepless corners of the city, as train stations become shelters, and as even dreams are measured by the price of rent, we are forced to ask ourselves, where are we headed? No one expects a perfect city. But if New York can't protect the very people who built it, if even the most steadfast symbols are wavering, then perhaps that says something bigger, not just about this city, but about what we once believed was unlosable. Can New York still be the place where dreams begin? Or are we ourselves becoming witnesses to an ending that no one dares to name? Please leave your story in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to. But everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands, one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organization, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or stereotyping. We do not condone any illegal behavior whatsoever. We do not normalize suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion, but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.